October 4, 1918, 10:30 a.m., Argonne Forest, France. Major Charles Whittlesey crouched in a muddy crater, counting the ragged survivors around him. 194 men. That's all that remained of the 550 who'd pushed into this godforsaken pocket of German-held forest 4 days ago. Above them, American artillery shells screamed down onto their own position. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't killing them. Whittlesey had one option left. In a small wooden cage covered with a blood-stained coat sat the last carrier pigeon, a small blue checker bird named Cher Ami. Before we continue with Cher Ami's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to the Argonne Forest, October 4th, 1918, where Major Whittlesey was about to make a desperate gamble. The bird weighed less than a pound. The message tied to its leg might as well have weighed 1,000. We are along the road parallel to 276. 4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. 25 miles to headquarters, through German machine gun fire, through American shrapnel, with one eye already damaged from earlier combat. Whittlesey released the latch. Cher Ami didn't hesitate. The bird shot upward through the canopy of shattered trees, wings beating frantically against the morning fog. Immediately, German riflemen spotted the movement. Bullets cracked through the air. One caught Cher Ami in the chest. Another shattered the bird's right leg, leaving it dangling by a tendon. A third shot took out the left eye. The pigeon tumbled, spiraling downward. Every man in that crater held his breath. Private Jacob Rosen, 22 years old, from Brooklyn, whispered, "Come on, bird, come on." Cher Ami caught air. Somehow. With one eye gone, chest bleeding, leg hanging useless, the bird leveled out and climbed. Higher, faster, disappearing into the smoke and mist, heading southwest toward headquarters at Rampont. 25 miles, 25 minutes. The bird would have to maintain an average speed of 60 miles per hour. Wounded, half-blind. Through a battlefield that had already killed 2 other messenger pigeons that morning. But before we understand how Cher Ami accomplished the impossible, we need to go back. Back to where this story really began, and back to the men who needed that bird to survive. Major Charles Whittlesey wasn't supposed to be a combat officer. The 40-year-old Wall Street lawyer from Williams College had been commissioned in 1917. More paperwork than battlefield experience. 5'9", thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a professor than a battalion commander. His men called him the Professor behind his back, usually affectionately. Whittlesey had joined because his country asked. That's simple. He believed in duty the way some men believed in God. On October 2nd, 1918, when ordered to advance into the Argonne Forest as part of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, he didn't question. He advanced. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was America's largest military operation of World War I. Won 2 million American soldiers. The goal: break through the German Hindenburg Line, end the war by Christmas. The Argonne Forest was supposed to be the easy part. Lightly defended, command said. Intelligence said German forces were retreating. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The forest was a green nightmare. Dense undergrowth, ravines hidden under leaf cover, machine gun nests every 40 yards. And the Germans weren't retreating, they were dug in, waiting. Between October 2nd and October 6th, the 77th Division suffered 172 casualties in the Argonne. That's 1 man wounded or dying every 6 minutes for 4 straight days. But Whittlesey's battalion pushed deeper than anyone. They followed orders. They advanced to the objective, a small valley parallel to the Charlevoix Mill Ravine, coordinates 276. 4. And the French units on their left flank never showed up. The American units on their right flank fell back under withering fire. Whittlesey and 550 men suddenly found themselves a mile ahead of friendly lines, completely surrounded by German forces. The Germans called them Die Verloren Battalion, the Lost Battalion. Captain George McMurtry, Whittlesey's second-in-command, was the first to realize how bad it was. McMurtry, 43, a former New York City police officer and Harvard football player, had survived the Spanish-American War. He knew trapped when he saw it. On October 3rd, he crawled to Whittlesey's position and spoke quietly. "Charlie, they're behind us. They're on both sides. We're in a pocket." Whittlesey nodded. He'd already counted the casualties from the first German assault. 68 men dead, another 122 wounded, and they'd been cut off less than 24 hours. The battalion had no radio. Communication technology in 1918 meant field telephones connected by wire, and those wires had been cut by German artillery within the first hour. Colored flares could signal aircraft, but thick forest canopy made that useless. Runners trying to reach American lines were shot before they made 100 yards. That left the Pigeons. The U.S. Army Signal Corps Pigeon Service had supplied each battalion with a mobile pigeon loft, a wooden crate carrying 12 to 20 birds. The pigeons were trained to fly back to their home loft at division headquarters, carrying messages in small aluminum capsules attached to their legs. In theory, it was 19th century technology adapted for modern war. In practice, it was the only communication system that worked when everything else failed. By October 3rd, Whittlesey had already sent 8 pigeons. 2 were shot down immediately. 3 never arrived, likely killed by German riflemen who'd learned to watch for the birds. 1 arrived with a message so blood-soaked it was unreadable. 2 made it through, but their messages requesting reinforcements went unanswered. Command didn't believe the situation was that desperate. The Germans tightened the noose. They brought up flamethrowers, Minenwerfer trench mortars. On the night of October 3rd, they launched a brutal assault from 3 sides simultaneously. Private Jeremiah "Jerry" Healy, 19 years old from Boston, had been joking that morning about the Red Sox winning the World Series. By midnight, Healy was dead, his foxhole overrun by German Stoßtruppen, throat cut in close-quarters combat. Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm, leading a German patrol, reported back to his commander, "The Americans are surrounded. They cannot escape. We will eliminate them by tomorrow." Wilhelm was confident. He had good reason to be. Every American attempt to break out had failed. The Germans controlled the water source, a small stream 200 yards away. The Americans were down to 1 canteen per 5 men. Food was gone, medical supplies exhausted. Wounded men lay in the mud, groaning with nothing but field dressings over sucking chest wounds. And then, October 4th, the American artillery began. Not German artillery, American. The 77th Division's artillery batteries, positioned 3 miles behind the lines, had received faulty coordinates. They thought Whittlesey's position was 400 yards south of where it actually was. At 9:47 a.m., they opened up with a rolling barrage intended to soften German positions before a relief push. The first shell hit directly in the American perimeter. It killed 4 men instantly. Private Rosen watched his best friend, Corporal Abraham Krotoshinsky, 24, from the Lower East Side, get buried alive when the explosion collapsed his foxhole. They dug him out, unconscious, face blue. "Abe always said he wanted to open a deli after the war," Rosen muttered, trying to clear mud from Krotoshinsky's mouth. "Best pastrami in Manhattan," he said. "We'd be partners." The shells kept coming, 75mm high-explosive rounds, every 30 seconds. The men couldn't dig deeper. Water table was 18 inches down. They couldn't retreat, Germans on all sides. They pressed themselves into the mud and prayed. Whittlesey had sent 9 pigeons. He had 3 left. He'd been saving them, hoping for a clear shot at getting a message through. Now he had no choice. He sent 2 pigeons with messages. "Our own artillery is firing on us. Stop the barrage immediately." Both birds were shot down within sight of the perimeter. German riflemen had positioned themselves specifically to intercept any pigeon launches. They knew it was the Americans' last communication method. 1 pigeon left, Cher Ami. The bird's name meant "dear friend" in French. Cher Ami was a blue-check cock pigeon, hatched in England, donated to the U.S. Army Signal Corps by British pigeon fanciers in 1918. The bird had already made several successful 25-mile flights from forward positions back to division headquarters. But never under these conditions, never wounded, Never through this level of concentrated fire. Captain McMurtry looked at Whittlesey. If this one doesn't get through, we're finished. They'll shell us until there's nobody left. Whittlesey's hands trembled slightly as he wrote the message on the tiny slip of paper. His handwriting, usually neat, was cramped and desperate. We are along the road parallel to 276-4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. He rolled the paper tight, slipped it into the aluminum capsule, and attached it to Cher Ami's leg. The bird looked at him with dark, steady eyes. Whittlesey remembered absurdly that someone had told him Pigeon's mate for life. This bird probably had a mate back at the loft, waiting. Go, Whittlesey whispered. He opened his hands. Cher Ami launched vertically, instinct driving the bird upward through the only open space, straight up through the canopy. For 3 seconds everything seemed possible. Then the German rifles opened up, concentrated fire from at least 30 positions. They'd been waiting for this. The air filled with the crack, crack, crack of Mauser 98 rifles, the heavier thump of machine gun rounds. The first bullet hit Cher Ami in the chest, penetrating the breastbone. The bird jerked in mid-air. The second round destroyed the left eye socket. The third, the one that should have ended everything, struck the right leg, shattering bone, leaving the limb connected only by a thin strand of tendon. The aluminum capsule with Whittlesey's message dangled from that shredded leg. Cher Ami dropped, fast, tumbling through branches, wings flailing uselessly. Private Rosen, watching from his foxhole, felt his stomach drop. He'd seen men die that same way, the helpless tumble, the body giving up. But 15 feet from the ground, something happened. Cher Ami's wings caught air. The bird leveled out, wobbling, listing hard to one side but level, and then impossibly climbed. 1 wing beat, 2, 3, rising through the smoke and cordite haze, rising through the screaming artillery, rising toward the one patch of clear sky visible through the shattered forest. The Germans kept shooting. Cher Ami kept flying. At 10:32 a.m., the bird cleared the tree line and banked southwest, toward Rampont, toward home, toward the loft where it had been raised, where its mate waited, where instinct pulled it like an iron wire. 25 miles. The bird had to cover it in under an hour, or Whittlesey's men would be dead. In the loft at Rampont, Private John Nell, 21 from Ohio, was cleaning feed trays when he heard the familiar flutter of arrival wings. He glanced up, expecting one of the routine messenger birds from rear positions. Instead, he saw something that made him drop the tray. A pigeon, barely recognizable as a pigeon, crashed through the loft entrance. Blood soaked the bird's chest. The left side of its head was a ruined mess where the eye had been, and the right leg, Nell would remember this for the rest of his life, hung by a thread swinging grotesquely with each movement. The aluminum message capsule dangled from that thread. Nell shouted for his sergeant. Sergeant Richards, 34, a career army man from Georgia, rushed over. He'd seen wounded pigeons before. He'd never seen one this destroyed, still flying. "Jesus Christ," Richards whispered. "How is it alive?" The bird collapsed on the loft floor, chest heaving. Richards carefully, so carefully, detached the message capsule from the shredded leg. His hands were shaking. He unscrewed the capsule and pulled out the blood-stained paper. He read it twice. Then he started running. At 10:58 a.m., 26 minutes after Cher Ami had been released, the message reached Major General Robert Alexander, commanding the 77th Division. Alexander read it once and grabbed the field telephone. Cease fire on coordinates 276. 4, immediately." At 11:02 a.m., exactly 75 minutes after the American barrage had begun, the shelling stopped. In the pocket, Whittlesey raised his head from the mud. The silence was so sudden, it felt like someone had stuffed cotton in his ears. Around him, men slowly lifted their faces, not quite believing. "It stopped," someone said. It actually stopped. Private Rosen was crying. He wasn't ashamed. Half the men were crying. Corporal Krotoshinsky, who'd regained consciousness, grabbed Rosen's arm. "The bird made it. The bird made it, Jerry." "Had to," Rosen said. "Had to." They were right. But they wouldn't know the cost until much later. At Rampont, An Army veterinarian named Captain John Johnson, 38, from Iowa, worked frantically to save Cher Ami. The chest wound had missed the heart by millimeters. The eye was gone, nothing to be done. But the leg. The leg was still attached by that thin strand of tendon and skin, blood vessels somehow intact. Johnson made a decision that would have been considered insane for a bird. He amputated the ruined portion of the leg and carved a small wooden prosthetic. Then he operated for 3 hours, closing the chest wound with sutures finer than human hair. Cher Ami survived the surgery. Barely. "This bird," Johnson told Sergeant Richards, "should be dead 10 times over. I've never seen anything like this, not in humans, not in animals. This bird wanted to live." Back in the pocket, the situation was still desperate but no longer hopeless. The artillery barrage had stopped, which meant headquarters knew their position. Relief would come. It had to. It did, but not quickly. German forces, realizing the Americans had gotten a message through, launched one final massive assault on October 7th. They threw everything they had: flamethrowers, grenades, fixed bayonets. The fighting was hand-to-hand, savage, the kind of combat that broke men's minds. Lieutenant Wilhelm led the assault personally. He made it 30 feet into the American perimeter before Private Rosen shot him through the throat with a Springfield rifle at point-blank range. Wilhelm died instantly, face down in the mud. But the Germans couldn't break through. The Americans, knowing relief was coming, held. Barely. On October 8th, at 4:17 p.m., elements of the 82nd Division broke through German lines and reached the pocket. They found 194 survivors out of the original 550. Every single one was wounded. Some had been hit multiple times. They were out of ammunition, out of food, out of water. Some were so dehydrated they couldn't stand. Major Whittlesey, eyes hollow, asked the relief commander one question. "Did the Pigeon make it through?" "It did, sir, saved your lives." Whittlesey nodded slowly, then he sat down in the mud and didn't move for 20 minutes. The numbers told the story. Between October 2nd and October 8th, 356 men of the 77th Battalion died in the Argonne Forest pocket. Another 144 were evacuated with wounds so severe they'd never see combat again. The lost battalion had suffered a 91% casualty rate, one of the highest of any American unit in WWI. But 194 men survived who would have died without Cher Ami's flight. The Pigeon recovered slowly. The chest wound healed. The bird adapted to the wooden prosthetic leg, learning to balance and even fly short distances. The Army Signal Corps recognized what Cher Ami had accomplished. In a ceremony at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, General John Pershing himself awarded the bird the French Croix de Guerre Medal for heroic service. It was the first time the French military honor had been awarded to an animal. Photographs from the ceremony show Cher Ami perched on a handler's arm, the wooden leg visible, the empty eye socket scarred over. The bird looks directly at the camera with its one remaining eye. There's something in that gaze. Exhaustion, maybe, or the 1,000-yard stare of combat trauma. Even pigeons carry war with them. But the Army couldn't save Cher Ami from the wound's long-term effects. The chest injury had damaged internal organs. Infection set in despite the veterinarian's best efforts. On June 13, 1919, 8 months after the flight that saved 194 men, Cher Ami died at Fort Monmouth. The bird was 1 year old. The Army didn't let Cher Ami be forgotten. They preserved the body through taxidermy and donated it to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. If you visit the National Museum of American History today, you can see Cher Ami in a glass case, wooden leg and all. The Croix de Guerre medal hangs beside the display. Thousands of visitors pass by every year. Most stop for maybe 15 seconds, read the placard, take a photo, move on. Few understand what they're looking at, the physical embodiment of impossible courage, a 1-pound bird that flew through concentrated rifle fire with catastrophic injuries, because instinct and duty demanded it. As for the men of the lost battalion, their fates varied wildly. Major Charles Whittlesey became a national hero overnight. Newspapers called him the gallant major of the lost battalion. He received the Medal of Honor. He was paraded through New York City. President Woodrow Wilson personally congratulated him. Whittlesey hated every second of it. The publicity felt like a betrayal of the 356 men who'd died under his command. He gave interviews because ordered to, but his answers were terse, uncomfortable. Friends said he never smiled after the Argonne. On November 26, 1921, 3 years after the battle, Whittlesey boarded the steamship SS Toloa bound for Havana. Somewhere in the night, he walked to the stern deck and jumped overboard. His body was never recovered. He was 43 years old. Captain George McMurtry survived, physically unscathed, but mentally shattered. He received the Medal of Honor alongside Whittlesey. After the war, he returned to New York and worked in finance, married, had children. But he suffered from what we'd now call PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, survivor's guilt. He died in 1958 at age 83, having rarely spoken publicly about the Lost Battalion. Private Jacob Rosen returned to Brooklyn, worked as a mechanic in his uncle's garage. He married Sarah Goldstein in 1920, had 3 children. He never opened the deli he'd planned with Abe Krotoshinsky. The dream died with his friend in the mud. Rosen died in 1972, age 73. His obituary in the Brooklyn Eagle mentioned he'd served in WWI, but said nothing about the Lost Battalion. Corporal Abraham Krotoshinsky, who'd been buried alive by American artillery, survived and received the Distinguished Service Cross. He did eventually open a delicatessen, Krotoshinsky's Fine Foods on Delancey Street in Manhattan. It operated from 1925 to 1967. The pastrami was, by all accounts, exceptional. Abe died in 1969, age 75. His storefront had a small framed photo of the Lost Battalion behind the register. When customers asked about it, he'd just smile and change the subject. The Lost Battalion Memorial is not a grand monument. It's a small plaque in the Argonne Forest, near coordinates 276, 4, where Whittlesey's men held out. The inscription reads, "Here stood the 77th Division, the Lost Battalion, October 8, 1918. That's it. No names, no details, just the dates and the division number. Cher Ami's memorial is the bird itself, frozen forever in that Smithsonian display case, one eye, one leg, chest scarred, the Croix de Guerre medal gleaming under museum lights, but the real memorial is this. 194 men who would have died on October 4, 1918, lived instead. They went home. They had children. Those children had children. Today, thousands of people exist, driving to work, making coffee, falling in love, because a 1-pound bird flew 25 miles through rifle fire with a shattered body and a message tied to its leg. War produces endless stories of human courage, but sometimes the most extraordinary courage comes from the smallest creatures. Cher Ami didn't understand strategy or tactics. The bird didn't know about the Meuse-Argonne offensive or the Hindenburg Line or the geopolitical stakes of World War I. Cher Ami just knew, home is that direction. Fly there. No matter what. And 194 men lived because of it. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the forgotten heroes of war, both human and otherwise, hit that like button. Stories like Cher Ami's disappear without people willing to remember them. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another piece of history that deserves to be told. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Do you have a connection to World War I? Did your great-grandfather serve? Do you have a story of animal heroism from your own life? We want to hear it. Thank you for keeping these memories alive. Thank you for making sure that a small pigeon named Dear Friend isn't forgotten, because courage doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it comes on wings, bleeding, with one eye, refusing to quit. Sometimes it comes in the form of a bird that wouldn't die.